Chicago, Illinois, March 1995. The United Center press room is packed with journalists, photographers, television cameras, and radio correspondents. 43 members of the media have crammed into a room designed for 20. The folding chairs are arranged in tight rows, shoulder to shoulder, and still people are standing against the back wall, recorders extended, notebooks open, pens ready. Michael Jordan sits at the table at the front of the room. He is wearing a charcoal gray suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt open. He looks calm. He always looks calm. That is one of the things people forget when they talk about Michael Jordan. They talk about the athleticism, the championships, the scoring titles, but they forget the stillness. The absolute, unnerving stillness that lives behind his eyes when the world is pressing against him from every direction. He has been retired for 17 months. 17 months of baseball, of batting averages and minor league stadiums and curveballs he could not quite read the way he could read a zone defense. 17 months of the world deciding that Michael Jordan was finished. That what they had witnessed during those 3 consecutive championships was the peak, the summit, the full measure of the man, and that what remained was an aging athlete chasing ghosts in a sport his body was never built for. The announcement came 2 days ago. 2 words. 2 words transmitted by fax to the NBA offices, to the Chicago Bulls organization, and then leaked to every sports desk in the country within the hour. The fax read simply, "I am back." No elaboration, no press tour, no television special. Just 2 words from a man who had walked away from the most dominant run in the history of professional basketball and was now walking back, choosing to return in the middle of a season, weeks before the playoffs, at 32 years old, with 17 months of rust on hands that used to make scoring look like breathing. The room is getting noisy, not reverent, not respectful. Noisy in the way rooms get noisy when people sense an opportunity, when journalists smell the particular scent of a story that has already written itself. The story they have already written inside their heads is a simple one. A great champion returns too late. A proud man cannot accept his legacy. A hero becomes a cautionary tale. It is a story that has been told 100 times in sports history, and it writes itself beautifully, and it sells newspapers, and it generates exactly the kind of television debate that networks love. The moderator calls for questions. Hands go up across the room like a field of wheat in wind. The first question is polite. What motivated the decision to come back now in the middle of a season? Michael leans into the microphone. "Because I missed playing basketball," he says. His voice is even, no performance in it, no calculation, just an honest answer delivered without decoration. The second question is less polite. "Michael, you have been playing Double-A baseball for over a year. Your conditioning is different. Your timing will be different. Would you characterize this return as realistic, or is there some concern that the gap might be impossible to close at this stage of your career?" Michael looks at the journalist who asked it, looks at him for exactly 1 beat longer than is comfortable. Then he smiles. It is a small smile. Not warm, not cold. Somewhere in that precise middle space that tells you nothing about what is happening beneath it. "I am not concerned," he says. The journalist writes something in his notebook. The third question comes from a man in the third row, a columnist from a New York paper, a man who has built a career on a certain brand of contrarian sports commentary, the kind that is designed to provoke rather than illuminate. He stands up slightly as he asks the question, which is an interesting choice in a room where everyone else remains seated. "Michael," he says, with a particular kind of politeness that is not politeness at all. His career batting average in the minors was around .220. For viewers at home, that means he failed to get a hit roughly 78% of the time. He pauses, and someone in the back of the room actually laughs. A short, surprised laugh, quickly swallowed, but audible. And it spreads. Not a wave of laughter, but a ripple. The sound of a room that has been given permission to smile at something it was afraid to smile at out loud. The columnist continues, "Do you believe that a player who spent more than a year struggling against minor league pitching has the physical tools to compete against Shaquille O'Neal, against Penny Hardaway, against a Knicks defense that has spent 3 years developing specifically to stop you?" The ripple of laughter fades. The room is waiting. Michael Jordan does not answer immediately. He sits back slightly. He looks at the table in front of him for a moment. Then he looks back up at the room, not at the columnist specifically, but at the room as a whole, a slow scan from left to right, as if he is memorizing something. When he speaks, his voice has not changed. Still even, still calm. But there is something under it now, something that was not there before. something that the journalists in that room will describe differently when they try to write about this moment later. Some will call it confidence, some will call it arrogance. One of them will get closest when she describes it as certainty, not the performed certainty of a man trying to convince people, but the quiet certainty of a man who does not need to. "I appreciate the question," he says. "I guess we will find out." And that is it. That is all he gives the room. Someone laughs again, but this time it is different laughter, nervous laughter, the laughter of people who have just realized they may have misread the situation. The press conference ends. The journalists file out. The columns get written. The television segments get produced. The consensus is what the consensus always is when it forms before the evidence arrives. He is 32. He has been gone too long. The game has moved on without him. The Orlando Magic with Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway are the new power in the East. The Houston Rockets with Hakeem Olajuwon have won back-to-back championships in his absence. The world has adjusted to a basketball reality that does not include Michael Jordan as its center of gravity, and the world believes it has adjusted permanently. His first game back is against the Indiana Pacers. He scores 19 points. For Michael Jordan, 19 points is an average night, a quiet night, the kind of performance that does not get remembered. But it is not remembered here as an average night. It is remembered as confirmation. "See," they say. "He is not what he was. The timing is off. The explosion is diminished. The man who used to make the impossible look routine is now making the routine look difficult." He wears number 45. His famous number 23 has been retired during his absence, a ceremony the Bulls held to honor what they believed was the permanent conclusion of his career. He looks strange in 45, not because the number is wrong, but because everything else about him is so right, and the number reminds you that something is different. Something has shifted. The jersey is wrong in the way a word sounds wrong when you have said it too many times. The doubts accumulate. He plays well in some games. In others, he struggles with his shooting touch, with timing, with the particular synchronization between eye and hand and muscle memory that takes months to rebuild after it has been allowed to go dormant. The columnists write their columns. The analysts analyze. The ratings are enormous because the country cannot stop watching, not because they believe he will succeed, but because they need to see with their own eyes how a legend's decline unfolds. Then comes the Orlando game, Game 1 of the first-round playoff series. The United Center is electric in a way it has not been electric in 2 years. Orlando is the best team in the Eastern Conference. Shaquille O'Neal is 23 years old, 6 feet 315 pounds of impossible dimensions, the most physically dominant player in the league. Penny Hardaway is 24, smooth and tall and multidimensional, the kind of player who can hurt you in 15 different ways. Horace Grant, who used to play beside Michael Jordan on those championship teams, is now wearing Orlando's blue and black and knows every habit, every tendency, every move in Michael's arsenal. And late in the fourth quarter of a game that Orlando wins, in a moment that will be replayed on every sports broadcast for the next 48 hours, Penny Hardaway reaches in and strips the ball from Michael Jordan's hands in the final seconds. Nick Anderson intercepts the loose ball. The game ends. Orlando wins. And on the broadcast, Nick Anderson says something that becomes its own headline, its own moment, its own line in the story of 1995. He says, "Number 45 doesn't explode like 45 used to." That sentence lands across the basketball world like a match dropped on dry wood. Number 45 doesn't explode like 45 used to. It is not a cruel statement. Anderson is not trying to wound. He is describing what he saw on the court, making an observation in the way that athletes sometimes make observations that are more honest than anything a columnist would dare to write. But the sentence, in its simplicity, becomes the summary of a position. The position that Michael Jordan is a diminished version of himself, that the number on his jersey is the tell, that he has come back as an echo. Michael Jordan reads the quote. He always reads everything. This is another thing people forget. He reads. He listens. He catalogs. He has a room inside his mind where he stores the things people say about him, the doubts, the dismissals, the laughter in press conference rooms, the columns that write the conclusion before the evidence is in. He stores them not as wounds, but as fuel. He has always understood something about motivation that other people understand intellectually, but cannot feel in their bodies the way he feels it. He understood that anger, properly contained, properly directed, is not destructive. It is an engine. That night, after the loss, he calls the Bulls front office. He makes a request that is simple and unprecedented. He wants his number back. He wants to wear 23 again. The league has a rule about switching numbers mid-playoffs. The Bulls agree to pay the fine, $50,000. For Michael Jordan, $50,000 is not a consideration. It is just the price of a statement. Game 2, the United Center. Michael Jordan walks out of the tunnel wearing number 23. There is a sound that happens in arenas when something shifts. Not a cheer exactly, not a roar, but something more primal than that. Something that happens in the chests of 12,000 people simultaneously, a collective intake of breath, a recognition that whatever is about to happen has changed in nature from what came before. The number 23 is not just a number. It is a signal. It is a declaration. The game begins. He feels different from the first possession, not in a way that can be measured statistically in the first minute, but in a way that the players on Orlando's team can feel immediately, in the quality of his movement, in the precision with which he reads the defense, in the way he sets up each action with 2 or 3 smaller decisions that only make sense in retrospect, when you trace them back through the sequence and understand that what looked like improvisation was in fact architecture. By the end of the first quarter, he has 12 points. By halftime, he has 26. The building is shaking, not metaphorically shaking. The sound of 12,000 people can move the air in an enclosed space in a way that you can feel in your sternum if you are standing close enough. The Orlando bench stays composed because they are professionals, because they have a system, because they have Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway, and they believe in what they have built. But there is a conversation happening on the Orlando sideline that their head coach, Brian Hill, will describe years later in an interview, and what he describes is the specific, unsettling experience of watching a player who has entered a state that you have heard about but rarely see in real time, the state that athletes sometimes call the zone, and that is inadequate language for what it actually is. What it actually is the complete disappearance of doubt. A normal basketball player, even a great one, carries doubt with him into every possession. Will the shot go in? Will the defender take away his left hand? Will his legs be tired in the fourth quarter? These are not conscious thoughts. They live in the body at a level beneath conscious thought, in the slight hesitation before a move, in the fractional second of recalculation before release, in the muscle tension that costs a free throw shooter 3 percentage points they never get back. Doubt is not weakness. Doubt is human. Doubt is what makes athletes need teammates and coaches and systems and preparation. What Michael Jordan has, on this night, in this building, wearing number 23 after 17 months away, and a press conference where a room laughed and a quote that said he no longer explodes the way he used to. What he has is the complete physiological absence of hesitation. He finishes the third quarter with 38 points. The Orlando Magic call their second timeout of the quarter. Shaquille O'Neal comes to the bench and sits on the folding chair and looks at the court for a moment, and then looks at nobody in particular and says nothing. What could be said? They are running their plays. They are defending correctly. Penny Hardaway is working. The scheme is functioning. And none of it matters, because Michael Jordan has entered a place where the scheme is the wrong tool. The scheme can contain a basketball player. What is on this court tonight is not a basketball player. What is on this court tonight is a man who spent 17 months being called finished, being told his body had expired, being laughed at in press conference rooms by men who write about athletic greatness without having experienced a single second of it, being compared unfavorably to his own former self by a player who reached in during a crucial moment and came away with the ball and then said into a microphone what no one was supposed to say out loud. What is on the court is a man answering every single one of those things simultaneously in the only language that has ever mattered in this arena. 55 points. In a playoff game. In his first playoff game after 17 months of retirement, against the best defensive team in the Eastern Conference, on a night when something in the alignment of pressure and preparation and fury and stillness produced something that the people who witnessed it will spend the rest of their lives trying to describe to people who were not there. He does not celebrate wildly when the buzzer sounds. He does not gesture to the crowd or point at the press section or find the camera and say anything. He walks to center court. He shakes hands with the Orlando players with the particular respect of a competitor who understands what it costs to do what they do, and then he walks toward the tunnel. Somewhere in the press section, the columnist from New York is staring at his notebook. He has written nothing. The page is blank. Nick Anderson will be asked about that quote for years. about what happens when a player who no longer explodes like he used to produces the most explosive performance in the building's history. He will answer those questions gracefully, honestly, the way good athletes do, because the court is the final argument, and the court has spoken, and there is nothing left to debate. The next day the columns are different, not because the columnists have changed, but because the evidence has changed, because the thing they said could not happen, happened, and happened in a way that did not feel like a partial vindication or a temporary outlier, but like a demonstration, like a man walking into a room where people had been laughing about him and sitting down at the table and doing the thing they said could not be done so cleanly, so completely, so undeniably that the laughter is not even embarrassing in retrospect. It simply stops existing. The room rewrites itself. 17 months. A baseball diamond. A press conference where someone laughed and someone else almost laughed. A fax with 2 words. A number that said something was different. A quote about an explosion. A night in Chicago where 12,000 people felt the air move. None of what happened can be adequately explained by statistics. 55 points is a number. It measures output. It does not measure what it costs a man to prove something to a world that had already written his conclusion, to walk back through the door that history was ready to close, to look at every doubt that had accumulated in 17 months and translate it, quietly, without anger that anyone could see, into something that had no vocabulary except flight. For the rest of his career, whenever someone asks Michael Jordan about the return, about the doubt, about the press conference and the laughter and the quote and the 55, he gives different pieces of the answer depending on who is asking. But once, in a private conversation that a former teammate will repeat years later, he gave the complete answer. "They thought they were laughing at me," he said. "They were actually loading me.